today. When I first heard about the Kindness Festival, I saw the date. The date means a lot to me, because 37 years ago, I woke up to the news that a bomb had gone off at a hotel in Brighton. And I knew that my dad was staying there. It was the Conservative Party conference, and he was staying there with his wife. At the end of the day, on the 12th, we heard that my father's body had been found. The IRA said they were responsible. For most of you, the IRA would be a history lesson, but some of us, we grew up with the IRA attacks in our areas. I never thought my dad would be a target. I lived in peacetime. But from the moment I knew my dad was killed, my heart was opened to the reality of war, of violent conflict, of terrorism. And I couldn't go back to the person I had been. So I made a decision 2 days later. I am going to bring something positive out of this. I'm going to understand those who killed my dad. I don't want an enemy. I don't want to blame anyone. I don't want to be a victim. I saw it as a choice. And a journey started. And it was a journey which has taken me in many different places. I ended up speaking in Belfast in the height of the violent conflict. I ended up meeting people high up in Sinn Féin, the political part of the IRA. And for me, that was about humanising the other. And finally, we had the peace process. Every time a bomb had gone off, I felt the pain and cared deeply. But as the peace process, I could start contributing again. I'd had an experience very early on of sharing a taxi with a random stranger in London. And I asked him, because I knew he was from Belfast, what do you know about the IRA? They killed my father, I want to understand. And he said, my brother was in the IRA. My brother had been killed last year by a British soldier. So we represented different sides. And yet we spoke of a world where peace was possible. And I left the taxi, I thought, I can build a bridge across the divide. And the hardest bridge that I could cross, that I could meet, was the actual man who killed my father. He came out of prison in June 1999 as part of the peace process. And I remember looking at the TV, I was shocked. What was he thinking? What was he feeling? And then the idea came to me, now is the time to meet him. It took 1.25 years. This is 2000, very early on in the peace process. And I went to meet him on my own in Dublin, just at a normal house in suburban Dublin. I now do restorative processes. This broke every rule. There was no one there to facilitate, to support, for the preparation, but I was determined to meet him. Not to change him, not to tell him he was wrong or bad, but to look into his eyes and see his humanity. I just needed him to show up, and then I would listen to him and ask him questions. I had no need for myself. This was all about seeing him. He was the most demonised terrorist we had at that moment. Obviously things have changed. But back in 2000, he was seen as the ex-terrorist the terrorist still, who nearly killed the whole British government. I remember being terrified, waiting for him to come. What would I feel? Would I feel anger? Would I feel rage? Would I want to blame him? I was terrified. But my heart knew I needed just to be present to him. That first meeting was 3 hours long. I remember it so well. He arrived with a sense of righteousness, justification. They were the ones who were the oppressed. And my father represented the power of the elite. And I even shared a poem that I'd written for him. And in that poem I talked about the struggles his community had had, and I was sorry for that. And after an hour and a half, I could see he was someone he had his reasons why he joined the IRA. It wasn't a quick fix for him. He struggled with it, he thought about it. He wanted to respond to his community, to the suffering he saw. And though I never is going to agree violence works, because for me it doesn't. I'm committed to non-violence. I could see that he had his reasons, his feelings, his pain, and that in that moment he was no longer the faceless enemy. He was a human being with a story. And so I was about to go when he looked at me and he said, "Joe, I've never met anyone who's listened to me like you have, so much dignity. How can I help you? Can I hear your anger and your rage?" And I knew in that moment that he stopped justifying. He'd taken off his political hat and became vulnerable. And he wanted to know the impact of the bomb on my life. He wanted to know the kind of man my dad had been. And so I stayed. This was more than I bargained for, and I was terrified, but I knew this was the start of something. So that was 21 years ago. We have become friends. It's a challenging friendship. We've actually come together to speak in Leeds many times. I'm still in touch with him. We've shared platforms over 300 times. The first time we spoke in public, he said, "I now know I could have sat down and had a cup of tea with Joe's dad." Now, the Conservative government didn't have a policy of cups of tea with terrorists. They still don't have many policies of cups of tea. But I could imagine the two men sitting together, listening to each other. And to me, that's about dignity, respect, even if there's difference of opinion. There's curiosity. A lot of the words we've heard already today. And also, he shared with me so much about his own story, what he's been through, that I wonder, if I lived his life, would I have made the same choices? I don't know. And in that moment, there is nothing to forgive. There is empathy. He would later say he was disarmed by my empathy, and if I'd gone in there shouting, "I'm right, you're wrong, I'm good, you're nasty," he would have stayed in a very safe place of righteousness. For the last 21 years have been extraordinarily transformative for me. I didn't mean to change him, but change myself, and I'm still changing. I've learned so much, and I still am. Now, the last couple of years have been challenging for all of us in some way. And I've had a lot of time to reflect and to see what's happening, and I actually had an opportunity to work in a school in Tower Hamlets, online, and then I went in person. And it was a girls' school, 100% Muslim. All of them have their stories of what they've been going through the pandemic. All of them have hardships. And I started by listening. I always listen. And by listening to them, they felt safe, and they opened up and shared how they felt, what's been happening with them. And these are 13 and 14-year-olds who'd lost a year at school. And then after a few weeks of being listened to, they said, "Okay, we want to do something." They knew that the course was about being a peace ambassador. And I said, "Okay, what would you like to do?" And we talked about different options, with the limitations still of the pandemic, and they decided to do projects on kindness and resilience. It's their projects. They created badges with beautiful messages they gave to their teachers. They created posters. And they noticed that their teachers were struggling, so they wanted to give something back to them. And as soon as they felt heard, they wanted to give to other people. And the posters that they made, the exhibition, won the prize of the school. But for me, the most important thing was seeing their faces. They started off, understandably, confused, upset, disappointed, scared. And I remember being in the room with them, and they were creating these badges. They made one for me that I'm wearing on my coat. And their faces lit up with happiness. And at the end they said, "We realise that thinking of other people and being kind to ourselves, is one way of responding to the challenges we're facing." Now, if I'd gone in and said to them, "You need to create kindness projects," it wouldn't have worked. It came from them. And what does that show us about the human spirit? That when we're heard and listened to, we all want to be positive change makers. And that is my belief. That's what I've seen. A lot of the work I've been doing is about empowering young people from communities that are demonised and marginalised, to give them space to be who they really are, which is positive change makers. Kindness to me is a huge part of my work. I was thinking today, what is the opposite of kindness? And I think it starts with righteousness. Now, I own up. There are times when I get really into my righteousness, indignation. How can you think that? I'm right, you're wrong. And it comes with a heavy emotion. And then I see that righteousness can become a justification, and that leads to demonisation. I believe when we start justifying, we can start doing things which are less than kind. We can start doing things that hurt people. The stories I've heard from Northern Ireland, from Rwanda, from many, many, many conflicts, there's always a righteousness there. We are more right than you. We are more important than you. So what's the antidote? Kindness, empathy. Someone said it's a verb. I say empathy becomes a verb. It becomes a doing thing. Because if I can empathise and see humanity in everyone in the world, then I'm going to want for everyone in the world the same needs that I have to be met. They need to be safe, to have shelter, have food, practice religion. But that's not what's happening if we look at our leaders in the world. That's not. There are a few exceptions, but that's not what's being practiced. So we all know we're going through changes, and to me it's kindness and empathy and love is at the heart of it. That's the only way. We have to care for everyone in the same way. And I believe we all have that capacity to be kind. So it starts with us all. So today, I commit to letting go even more of my need to be right, my need to feel righteousness, my need to justify some behaviour that I do that's not always kind. I commit, 37 years after the bomb killed my father, to love more, to be kinder, to spread empathy. Every year I commit more, and every year I feel like I'm starting at the beginning. I think back to the 27-year-old me that wanted to create something positive in the world. And all these years later, it's still there. Someone says, surely Joe, you can be a normal person now and give all this up. I'm like, oh, no. Because as long as there is suffering in the world, I care, and I want to care. I want to feel upset and care about people, because out of that caring and the pain then can become the wanting to help and make a difference. And sometimes with the trauma and the pain, it's important to stop and look after myself, and then get up again and see what I can do to make a difference. So to be here with you all today on the anniversary means so much. I really thought I was going to be in my little house just with my own four walls and no one to speak to. I probably would have used social media. But actually to be with real people. This is the first talk I've given, apart from my schoolwork, since I was in India before the pandemic when I gave the keynote. And I'm so pleased it's Leeds that I've come back to speaking, and I'm so pleased it's the KindEx Festival. That's what we're all talking about. And I know I'm leaving, got to get a long train back to Somerset, but I know I'm going to be leaving so encouraged and heartened. And you know what, I think hope for a more beautiful future, for a fairer future, is a form of non-violence. It's so easy to give in to doom and gloom. But we need to hope, we need to believe together that we can make a difference. And I really believe together we can. We all have a voice, everyone matters. So I'm dedicating the next few years with the people who don't feel they have a voice. Because I do have a voice, and I'm going to use it to listen to those and make sure they have a platform. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And today, I choose even more love and kindness. Thank you. That doesn't happen on Zoom.
Bye.